this never happened. And it says, please be advised that Tommy Morrison was seen in my office on September 29th, 2011. He had a large abscess to his right axilla, which was a result of an bite that had occurred a few days prior to his visit on the 29th. It was necessary to drain the abscess at that time. If you require any additional information, please do not hesitate to contact me. And that is a letter that's signed by a doctor, Dr. Antonio Ossio. So that so that was the beginning of that after he came out of jail. Then he went for surgery, and that was in Fort Sanders Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee. And actually the surgeon, as soon as Tommy and I walked in the door before surgery, he looked at Tommy, he said, "You're in denial." Those were his first words. "You're in denial. You tested positive for HIV in Vegas in 1996, and you've been in denial ever since." Those were his exact words. And his name is Dr. George Cookman II. All right. And so I was kind of quite concerned about that, but, you know, we thought, well, you know, he needs surgery. So on December 1, we went for surgery, and it was supposed to be a 1-hour surgery. And we didn't come out until December 8. For some reason, it was just complications for the surgeon. I don't know whether they were on purpose or not, but we came out, and Tommy was a completely different man, completely different. On the way to the hospital, he had driven. I had sat next to him in the car. On the way back, I had to drive. He could not drive. He could barely do anything. So we get home on December 8th. One of the first things that happens when we're sitting on the porch is he gets served with a restraining order from his second ex-wife, right? To never see his kids again, which is a real shame because that's the reason why we moved to Tennessee, right? And he wanted to see that child grow up and never got the chance to. So the next day, the home health lady came to change the wound on his chest. And I'm reenacting this, but I was there, and these photographs are actually real, and the gauze is real. Not from the date, because it was completely covered in blood. But this is a 4x4 piece of gauze. So the home health lady took the gauze off and was just about to put another piece of gauze back on it again, just like that, nice clean piece, when I, the wicked widow, spotted something in his chest like that, sticking out, right? And I said, "There's something in his chest." And she said, "No, that's all I've got to do." And I said, "No, there's something in his chest." So I'm reenacting for you, if you're watching this, 12 foot of surgical gauze left in Tommy's chest was pulled out. I'm reenacting and putting it into like a Kleenex box here, tightly packed. And what the nurse did, the home health nurse, she pulled on the strand, right? And this is for real. This is exactly what happened. And this is his chest. And out comes all this gauze. And Tommy is sitting on a stool in the kitchen, right? No pain meds, no anesthetic, no nothing. And this gauze is covered in blood clots, and it stinks, and it had been left in there for 8 days, packed, tightly packed. And for a documentary not to give any second to this event is just shameful, right? And out comes 12 foot of surgical gauze.
And now, by the way, this isn't just 2-ply toilet paper here. This is thick.
This is thick gauze, right? And then people tend to think it's some little strand like that. It's not. It's thick gauze, surgical gauze, 12 foot of it in his chest that gets pulled out by a poor home health lady who had no idea that it was in there. This is a photograph of me showing her, this is Tommy's chest, showing her where it is. And I take a couple of photographs because she didn't believe me that there was anything in there because there were no orders for her. So this is a flat tongue, right? And I'm showing her, wait, there's something in his chest. Can you imagine if we hadn't even have seen it, what would have happened? But still, pulling out something like that, something still did happen. So once it was pulled out, there it is. You could fit your whole hand inside Tommy's chest, right? Now, as I always say, you've never seen Tommy cry in the ring, and he served out of punches from Ray Mercer that night, and Michael Bent, and Lennox Lewis, but you've never seen him cry in the ring. He was crying. He was really crying.
As this is all going on, so Tommy's just chilling or not chilling, but he's in the kitchen, and y'all are just going to doctor this thing up. And he said, "Whoa, nay, what is that?" And does Tommy like look down and go, "Trisha, what the hell are you talking about?" Or anything like that? And then you point to it. I mean, so as it's being pulled, is he crying the entire? I mean, I'm sure this is an open wound. This has got to hurt like nothing.
Yeah, he is, but he's still tough, right? He's still a tough, and he's just used to pain. But he was crying, and the home health nurse was crying, and she actually had to sit on the sofa. I had to take care of her because she almost passed out. And then we did have a friend of Tommy's who was there at the time and witnessed it and took care of Tommy. And Tommy went into our bathroom there, and he said, "Just leave me alone." And he tried to resolve the situation, and he just was very tough. He walked out of there and walked down the road, and then came back again. He was that tough. But that night. And the nurse didn't suggest taking him to the hospital. We actually called the surgeon when this was happening and said, "What have you done? You left 12 foot of surgical gauze in his chest." "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. And so we carried on then looking after Tommy. And people say, "Well, why didn't you file a lawsuit against them for that?" Well, I actually have all the paperwork here that I sent, and I reported the surgeon to the Tennessee Medical Advisory Board while this was happening. They lost the paperwork, right? And then I had to refile it. And then in Tennessee, it's 12 months statute of limitations. And they said, "Sorry, you're too late."
Welcome to the South. We take our time.
So that's what happened. That was the beginning of his downfall. That night, he was walking back to the bedroom, and his leg gave way. Of all the things, his leg gave way on the side of the chest wound, and he fell directly through the wall, through the sheetrock, broke the sheetrock, and then he landed on his neck. And that was the start of his downfall. And we didn't know at the time, but landing on his neck actually caused him to paralyze half his voice box, which meant that it was very difficult for him to eat and drink without aspirating because the voice box wouldn't close properly. The surgeon said, because he said Tommy was diagnosed with HIV in 1996 in Vegas, right? By who? By Tony Holden. He's the only guy, that the wound would never heal. But actually, a year to the date of the surgery, the wound healed. And I don't have a color copy of this, but you can see where I've highlighted it's a nasty scar, but it actually healed. But what it did cause was septic shock and septicemia. And for 21 months, Tommy was in and out of septic shock and septicemia. And that's how he died on September 1, 2013, from cardiac arrest and septic shock, septicemia, and multi-organ failure. So that was the downfall, and nobody wants to talk about it. But I do, because that was the downfall.
I do too. And I have a question. I just trying to put this in my head. Were you there bedside when he took his last breath? That's the best way I could put it. Leading up to his last breath, I hate to say it like that, but did you say your goodbyes? And like, was he? I know he wasn't able to talk, but that happy and fresh. Was he able to communicate with you any way?
You know how he communicated over the 21 months was he would cough once for yes, cough twice for no, right? Because if it's your voice box, you can't verbally say a lot. Although if you're in a position where the voice box closes, he would actually be able to talk, right? It was just yeah.
Well, so there was a lot made, and that kind of fell into the narrative. That would plaster this picture of Tommy all over everywhere. You know, that he had looked like a 70-year-old man and all this and that.
Right.
And you know, you know, going back to the arrest, and he was in there 30 days. In there 30 days in solitary confinement. And this is a lot of things that a lot of people don't even know, with no blanket, no pillow, sleeping on a concrete floor. And I'm going to share, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I'm going to try and share what Tommy looked like the day of his arrest, and then what he looked like when he came out. And dadgummit, if I was in solitary confinement for 30 days, sleeping on a concrete floor and all this other stuff, I probably wouldn't be looking so fresh. But let's see here. Let me find it real quick. But while I pull that up, I mean, it's really, I'm not going to say amazing, but it's unbelievable how that they just wanted to run with Tommy's life was so, he just went so downhill, and he let himself go and this and that. And that here it is. Let me pull this up real quick. That he had, you know, after his AIDS diagnosis, just went downhill. And this is the stuff that needs to be told about him.
Yeah.
Let me get it up here real quick, and let's find it. Anyway, so Trisha, while I pull that up, after his passing, did his family, were they involved in any, you know, did they come to say goodbye, or did anybody do anything?
Well, he was referred to as the body, right? Which is kind of sad. Yeah. But I don't know if Tony Holden will remember this, but he wanted to subpoena Tommy's body, which is something pretty absurd. But no, nothing, no contact.
So, and then going back to, you know, there's a clip in that documentary where he says that he came to visit you guys, and that he said, you know, Trisha, Tommy's got AIDS, let him pass, and all that other hoopla. You know, that's not, did he come and did he disregard, did he know about the spider bite? Did he know about the sepsis? Did he know about everything else and still wanted to claim that he's got AIDS? And, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, what he said on that segment there is just another way of, I guess, making me look bad. I don't know why, but I've just shown you the proof from the physician that, you know, the physician said it was a spider bite, insect bite. That's what it was.
So what kicked off? What, and I guess we'll go to like chapter 3 of this. And by the way, thank you for hanging out with me as long as you have. And um, so, what kicked off the campaign that you started the last 10 years? What was the first steps? What got you going on it? I mean, obviously, I know why. Your love for Tommy. He's your husband, and he had a raw deal. There was a narrative painted about him, and this man right here who plasters my wall is my hero. And God bless you for doing what you're doing, because you have people like me who are fans, and we saw the 30 for 30. That's the most popular documentary out there. That was the narrative. And so what kicked it off, and you have made so much headway, we're going to get to that in just a second, of the positive press that you're starting to get. So what was the first door? What was the first avenue?
Well, how it all kicked off was when I got the post-mortem report from the physician, and the phone call to say that Tommy did not have HIV, did not have AIDS. So that started it off. It was also a promise to Tommy. You'll see a lot of clips on the media where he's trying to prove that he never had it, right? He was trying to do that since 1996. And one thing I promised to him when, as he was dying, was that I would carry on the fight for him. And, and I'm thinking at the time, how am I going to do that? But then when you've got all the science behind you, not the sweet science, but the science, that I thought, okay, I can do this for him, and I'm not going to give up showing people that he was innocent. I want him exonerated, because that's exactly what he was trying to do. So that's what started it. And I actually filed a lawsuit against people in Nevada, because that's where it all began. Nevada is the scene of the crime, let's say. And so after speaking with a physician in Vegas, where he said he didn't diagnose Tommy, I thought, okay, well then, somebody's responsible. So I filed a lawsuit in federal court in Nevada against the Nevada Commission, Mark Ratner, Dr. Margaret Goodman, and Quest Labs, and this Dr. John Hyatt. So that's how it all began. And over the last 10 years, we went to the Ninth Circuit Court. We also went to, this is the Ninth Circuit Court papers that you file. We also went to the Supreme Court, right? My friends up there, and did the rounds actually twice. So we did federal court, Ninth Circuit Court, Supreme Court, back again to federal court, back to the Ninth Circuit Court in San Francisco, and back again to the Supreme Court. And with every filing, I got more and more evidence from me. So it took 10 years to get everything I needed, right? And I'm thinking, I wish Tommy was here to see all that. Yeah. For example, during the lawsuit, they had to produce the lab report that everybody says, is what diagnosed Tommy with HIV. Okay. Now, the only problem is that the lab report has the wrong physician's name on it, has Tommy listed as 99 years old, right? And they stored the blood in a toxicology freezer. For whatever reason, it should have been room temperature. It would take 2 to 3 working days for it to be tested. So timeline, again, very important. The results were never really available. It had a protein as of the testing, P31. And this, again, 1996. In 1993, the FDA had taken that out. Fauci had taken that out, P31, as being a qualifying protein for HIV. So for whatever reason, it's showing up on a lab report. And then there's a Dr. Russell, who I have since, in the last few days, Googled Dr. Russell, right? He was never Tommy's physician, but also if this happened in 1996, Dr. Russell retired in 1985. So how can we be sending lab reports to a physician that retired almost 7 years prior, right? Plus, with every lab report, I don't know if you know this, but it's supposed to be signed off by a pathologist as being correct. And that's as per the Code of Federal Regulation, it has to be signed off. So none of this makes sense. And that's their only proof that Tommy had HIV, which was produced for the first time in 2014 from 1996. So that's what started it off. And then it carries on, and there's one docket here, docket 217. Listen to this sentence, right? This honorable court should not lose sight of the fact that no one diagnosed Mr. Morrison with HIV on February 10th, 1996.
That's called a mic drop, kids.
It says it right there, and that's filed by the Nevada Athletic Commission, docket 217, and it's 15 and 16. You can just pull it up yourself. So the whole lawsuit became more and more interesting. Then I find out that the actual test that Quest uses is a laboratory developed test, an LDT. And an LDT is not approved by the FDA. Okay, so that means that if it's not approved by the FDA, you cannot actually send out lab reports as per the CDC. You can't send out a lab report if it's an FDA approved test, non-FDA approved test, without getting it approved or any type of authentication. Right. So actually, as I'm still working on this, more and more stuff comes out. And then the AIDS conference, which Dr. Fauci attended, right? In 2018, it was the 22nd International AIDS Conference. The testing for RNA and DNA testing. So you've got the antibody testing, you've got the viral load testing, you've got the RNA, DNA testing, right? Which Fauci puts in for HIV/AIDS. Well, this comes out in the AIDS conference. RNA and DNA aren't infectious. Okay, so antibodies are not infectious. RNA and DNA aren't infectious. They're only genetic material and not the whole virus. You need the whole virus in order to infect somebody. So whenever you get tested for HIV, get them to test you for the whole virus to see if you're infectious. But the only problem is that there's no commercial test available to detect the whole virus out there, except for the test that Tommy did.
Wow. And, the reason I smile as much as I do while I listen to you give all this, and it's not because it's humorous to me. I am so proud that Tommy had you. I mean, that's a blessing. And like the presentation you did up in Washington, that's like a masterclass. And I mean, like you've done your research, and that's amazing to me. There are a few. So just to I want to clarify some of the outstanding not rumors, but I wanted to just address them. And because there's one person that we haven't brought up. We touched on him, but we didn't really bring him up. So I watched, there was a documentary Mike Tyson did where he referred to Don King as the devil incarnate. He says the most evil man that ever walked the face of the planet.
Wow.
So Tommy had a contract with the man. Once he was tested positive in 96, boom, null and void, right? There was an out. Now, I don't know if you want to delve into it, but there are stories that the day before all this HIV media came out in 96, there was a trailer. There was Don King had a little meeting with Tommy's maybe his entourage or his handlers, we'll call it, his representatives. Right. Is that something we want to discuss, or is that something we just want to leave on the sideline there?
No, let's discuss it, right? Because it's something that hasn't been included. There's a
Mm-hmm.
scene that's missing in ESPN 30 for 30,
Mm-hmm.
and the scene is something that is pretty important. Yeah, Don King. I've never met Don King. I believe he's getting on a bit now.
Yeah.
I've heard of him, but I don't know him. I did try and contact him at one point
Mm-hmm.
to see if he would help me out with this, because I couldn't believe all the stuff that I was finding out in this 10-year lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Why he never kind of said, Trisha, let's meet, because I lost millions of dollars, with Tommy being kicked out. Well, none of that happened. I'm thinking, why? So the Don King contract, which the Nevada Commission said never existed, is actually on the docket December 30th, 2020, thanks to Tommy's son, Kenzie, who
Mm-hmm.
located it for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody said they had it and couldn't find it. So
Mm-hmm.
Kenzie was great. I love him for it. And he brought that to me. And there's also dated January 22nd, 1996, just a few weeks before the fight, um, a document between Tony Holden and Don King, which was produced, right, where Tony Holden has his own contract with Don King
Mm-hmm.
for whatever reason, and Tommy never really knew about that one. Um, so Don King has stuck in my mind a little bit because, I don't know why he didn't tell the world that Tommy's opponent, Arthur Stormy Weathers, was never going to be able to fight. Because his manager had sent him on the 2nd of February, that's before the 10th of February, a letter and a physician's note saying Arthur Stormy Weathers cannot fight. And there was no replacement for him, right? They still did
Mm-hmm.
the weigh-in that night before, and that next day it wasn't Stormy Weathers that got kicked out, it was Morrison, right? So it's all been very interesting. And then I come across something um, which actually is mentioned in court records but never became available, that I found in Tommy's stuff, right? His secret stash. And it's something that's written by Tony Holden, and it's telling Tommy, it's kind of outlining the events of what happened.
Right.
For whatever reason, I don't know why somebody has to write that down. But he says that he got off the plane, he was met by Don King people, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the day of the fight, February 10th, and that his first stop was the trailer with Don King to finalize some business,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you think, well, what business could he have been finalizing?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, it's worth a mention because there was obviously communication between him and Don King, and that's where his own contract comes into play,
Mm-hmm.
right, with Don King.
And I'm assuming, Tommy made zero from Don King. And I find it
Yeah,
interesting that Tommy's unofficial advisor had a contract with probably the biggest promoter on the planet. I wonder if he
yeah.
made any money, and Tommy did not. So it's a lot of
He
ambiguity.
did. He did. He actually texted me. He did make, something from Don King
Mm-hmm.
on that contract.
Yeah,
And I won't disclose it
yeah,
today,
yeah, yeah. Obviously,
but
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
but but it will come out. And then what's really strange is that the medical release form, for the supposed HIV diagnosis, that's not Tommy's signature. And I even took it as far as a forensic handwriting expert, which is in court documents, and it's looking more like Tommy's ex-manager's writing, which would be John Brown.
Okay.
So, there's the whole story is pretty interesting, right?
Whew. Well, and listen, I've told you this candidly, and I'll tell you this on our show here,